3 million signatures, a disapproval rate of 39%, 16 overseas trips in just 5 months. These figures are enough to paint a picture of Keir Starmer's dismal leadership period. But what's most noteworthy here is that Starmer has just made another move that has everyone talking. If we can't trust him now, how can we trust him in the future? And I have some inside information that you're definitely not going to want to miss. Before we dive into the details of Starmer's latest shocking move, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Keir Starmer, once seen as the rising star of British politics, sparked much hope when he took over the leadership of the Labour Party. He promised to bring a new chapter following the controversial era of Jeremy Corbyn, leading many to believe he could revive the party's golden days. His early statements were full of confidence and ambition to reshape the party's image, eliminate anti-Semitism, and hold Boris Johnson accountable for his handling of the COVID-19 crisis. However, that promising start did not last. Today, Starmer's approval rating has plummeted to -39, lower than the crisis period of Boris Johnson, an alarming number that highlights a serious loss of trust. The strong image he initially projected has now given way to a series of blunders. At the party conference, Starmer was unable to present a clear policy. Attempts at humour, like a joke about Liz Truss, turned into a joke at his own expense. Those who once believed in him are now drifting away, disillusioned by a leader who is increasingly lacking direction. What has caused this decline? Is it the inconsistent policy changes, or the failure to capitalise on the Conservative Party's scandals? The answer may lie in both, along with one crucial factor: a lack of strategic vision and trust. The cold, hard numbers don't lie. -39 is not just a sign of mild internal dissatisfaction, but widespread opposition from a large portion of the public. Behind these numbers lies a series of broken promises, U-turns on policies, and growing division within the Labour Party. Instead of confronting reality and seeking to heal the rift, Starmer chose to ignore it. Almost 3 million people have signed a petition calling for a new general election, a shocking figure surpassing the population of many countries. The signatures are coming from all corners of the country, from all walks of life, not just those who have supported the Labour Party in the past. People are signing not for partisan reasons, but because they feel deceived. A farmer from Yorkshire is furious that Starmer, who once promised to support rural communities, now proposes an inheritance tax that threatens the survival of family farms. A teacher from Manchester feels that promises to improve education were just empty words, with the situation now even worse than before. It's not just Labour voters. Even those who once supported the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats, and even those indifferent to politics are speaking out. This is not just a political issue, it's a crisis of trust. Meanwhile, Starmer has responded by dismissing the petition, claiming it is full of fake signatures and influenced by foreign powers, an action that only further fuels the anger. This wave of dissatisfaction will not be easily silenced. The British public no longer accepts dismissal or arrogance. Starmer's journey from symbol of hope to centre of U-turns is a clear testament to his failure to deliver on promises. Commitments like supporting family businesses or protecting rural communities are now nothing but empty words. The inheritance tax he introduced is pushing long-established farms to the brink of collapse, with thousands of farmers marching to Westminster to protest, furious at this betrayal. Even within the Labour Party itself, the frustration is impossible to hide. One member has openly pointed out that the current policies bear no resemblance to the ideals they once promised. Yet, Starmer's team clings to the mantra of financial responsibility, ignoring the real-life impact on the public. As discontent continues to spread, Keir Starmer remains floundering in failure, lacking a clear plan to regain trust. With the numbers telling their own story and a public growing increasingly impatient, his future is certain to become more difficult unless he makes drastic changes. It is hard to find a single campaign promise from Keir Starmer that hasn't been altered or forgotten. His level of broken promises has reached an unacceptable threshold, while his indifferent attitude towards the growing disappointment from the public only fuels the outrage further. Starmer behaves as though everything is fine, despite a significant drop in support. people are increasingly realizing that they have been deceived. The greatest outrage stems from his pretending as if he never made any commitments, a move that has quickly eroded trust. From being known as Sir Integrity, Starmer didn't take long to become Sir U-Turn. His proposal to change the inheritance tax policy was just the beginning of his chaotic domestic policy. On the international stage, his conduct has been even more disappointing. As the country faces a severe crisis, instead of focusing on urgent issues, Starmer has chosen to spend his time on foreign trips. In just 5 months, he made 16 trips abroad, a figure that is truly surprising. Meanwhile, the cost of living continues to rise, the NHS is on the brink of collapse, and a petition calling for his resignation with millions of signatures is spreading. Rather than addressing these pressures, he has immersed himself in the role of a global traveller. Starmer's explanation for these trips is that they are about building relationships based on trust and respect through direct engagement. However, this statement is not convincing, as many believe what he really needs is to restore the trust of the British public. His destinations have ranged from Washington for the NATO summit, Berlin for the Euro 2024 final, Paris for the Olympic Games opening ceremony, to New York for the United Nations General Assembly. While the importance of these events cannot be denied, Starmer's participation in all of them while the country is in turmoil has sparked a wave of criticism. Inside sources suggest that most of the work during these trips could have been handled by other ministers, such as Foreign Secretary David Lammy or Defence Secretary John Healey. This raises suspicions that Starmer is looking to avoid responsibility at home rather than genuinely addressing foreign affairs. The series of trips has brought no significant achievements. There were no groundbreaking trade deals, no major benefits for the UK. Instead, Starmer has made himself the subject of ridicule, with his political colleagues dubbing him Sir Sabbatical. On the diplomatic front, the UK-US relationship, a cornerstone of foreign policy, is now significantly strained. Donald Trump, who could potentially return to the White House, has shown open contempt for the Labour Party. His disagreement with the Mayor of London, a Muslim, could have serious economic consequences. If Trump returns, his America First protectionist policies could create trade barriers, costing the UK billions of pounds. While other nations have been preparing for this difficult prospect, Starmer's administration seems to be ignoring the reality. Foreign Secretary Lammy is working to mend relations with Trump, but his previous harsh comments about the former president have made any reconciliation almost meaningless. Starmer's loose approach and irresponsible attitude, both domestically and internationally, have created fractures that will be hard to repair. A series of crises, both at home and abroad, have raised major questions about his leadership abilities, as well as the uncertain future of the Labour Party under his leadership. The current situation presents alarming challenges, but the issues surrounding Donald Trump are not the biggest obstacle Starmer faces on the international stage. Another crisis is emerging, one so serious that it could overshadow all concerns about Trump. This is the true test of his ability to formulate foreign policy. Ukraine is in grave danger, and the UK faces difficult choices that could reshape the European landscape. The question of Starmer's ability to handle pressure has never been more apparent. Currently, the UK continues to provide military and diplomatic support to Ukraine, with challenging decisions such as pushing for the use of Storm Shadow missiles to target Russian positions. However, the situation is far more complex. The UK's strategy is heavily reliant on support from the US. If Trump returns to the White House with his stance of rejecting the role of global policeman, the situation will take a more dangerous turn. In that case, America's withdrawal from the conflict would force the UK and its European allies to fend for themselves with limited resources. A defence analyst has stated that without the US, the UK's strategy in Eastern Europe would completely collapse, as London lacks the capacity to shoulder that role, not only in terms of military support, but the US also leads in imposing sanctions, sharing intelligence, and exerting diplomatic pressure on Russia. If the US withdraws, Russia will have more room to operate in Ukraine without significant opposition. Faced with this threat, the big question is, what is Starmer's contingency plan? From what has been shown, it seems that he has no clear roadmap. Starmer acts as if problems will disappear if ignored, when in reality, crises like these only worsen over time. While Starmer remains indifferent, European countries have proactively prepared alternative solutions. An EU diplomat has openly warned that the UK needs to wake up. If Trump wins and pulls out of Ukraine, the entire Western strategic framework will be under serious threat. The Labour Party, under Starmer's leadership, is being condemned for not grasping the urgency of the situation. This crisis extends beyond Ukraine and seriously threatens the UK's international standing. The role within NATO, relations with the EU, and even the position in the UN Security Council are all at risk of weakening. Amid this looming collapse, Starmer has yet to offer a clear strategy or concrete plan. His vague promises of standing by allies have failed to reassure the public, and criticism of his leadership is growing. In addition to the Ukraine crisis, other issues in Starmer's foreign policy are starting to surface. The relationship he once carefully nurtured with the business community is increasingly shaky. Before the election, Starmer regularly appeared friendly and shook hands with business leaders, making commitments for a new era of cooperation between the Labour Party and the private sector. He declared that Labour would not become the party of high taxes, but would instead promote sound financial management. However, the reality post-election has been the exact opposite of those promises. Starmer's government recently implemented a significant rise in national insurance contributions, directly burdening businesses. One business leader likened the move to inviting people to a lavish party, only to demand they pay the full bill when leaving. This tax increase has been a severe blow to the business community, leaving many employers feeling betrayed. Starmer's previous pledges now seem like empty words, and the trust he once worked hard to build is gradually disappearing. Keir Starmer once made bold promises for a Labour Party that would be friendly to business, but the reality has proven otherwise. His government continues to tighten the screws, pushing the business sector to the brink. The consequences are now clear, as companies across the UK are halting investment, viewing the country no longer as an attractive destination for capital. The response from the business community to the question, "Should we invest in the UK?" is increasingly a resounding no. What began as individual dissatisfaction has now turned into widespread anger. Business leaders who once placed their trust in change are now openly criticising the government. One director bluntly stated that the promise of an economically savvy administration had transformed into an outdated version of the old Labour Party, merely wearing a new coat. Even more concerning, economic downturn is no longer a distant threat but a harsh reality. Investment capital is draining at an alarming rate. Companies are halting expansions and even considering moving operations abroad due to punitive policies. One cannot help but wonder if Starmer truly believes he can deceive the business community, or if this is simply evidence of remarkable incompetence. Whatever the reason, the consequences are clear. The trust between the Labour Party and the business community has been almost entirely shattered, with little chance of recovery. The frightening thing is that what is happening may only be the beginning. If the course is not quickly changed, Starmer could lead the UK into an economic crisis even more severe than that of 2008. But it's not just the economy. Many other areas are also suffering significant losses due to weak leadership. The immigration crisis is one of the biggest issues, causing discontent across all social classes. Ahead of the election, Starmer promised a fair immigration system, balancing security and humanitarian concerns. However, with net migration reaching 600,000 in 2022, patience with him has reached its limit, even within his own party. Starmer seems to have abandoned all his previous promises. The shocking immigration figures, equivalent to the population of a large city, have been harshly criticised by both the left and the right. The left is dissatisfied, believing he is not doing enough to support immigrant communities, while the right accuses him of allowing the borders to be overrun. A Conservative MP bluntly stated that Starmer talks tough but is completely powerless in protecting the nation's borders. Pressure is mounting in residential areas. Housing shortages and overburdened public services are becoming increasingly apparent. Areas that once were loyal to the Labour Party are now turning their backs. A voter in the north, an area traditionally supportive of the party, bitterly remarked, "We don't recognise this party anymore. They've abandoned us." The divisions within the Labour Party are only making the situation worse. One faction supports open borders, while the other demands a firm closure, leaving Starmer caught between two opposing viewpoints. He tries to find consensus, but the result only exposes his inability to lead. Beyond immigration, the rise in crime is also pushing citizens into a state of anxiety. Starmer had promised to take a hard line on crime, but in reality, he has completely lost control. His powerlessness is becoming evident, and public confidence in his leadership is rapidly fading, with disappointment towards the Labour Party growing wider. During his election campaign, Keir Starmer didn't hesitate to present himself as a decisive leader committed to maintaining law and order. He promised to increase the police budget, provide additional resources, and tackle the rising crime rate head-on. Many placed their trust in him, hoping he would turn these promises into action and bring safety to communities. But the reality turned out to be the complete opposite, as if everything had been turned upside down in a world spiralling out of control.